Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for the Practical Practices of Mural Making webinar today. I'm Ryan Patterson with the Maryland State Arts Council. We are still bringing in one of our presenters, so bear with us. I'm so grateful you all joined us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I'm just going to start with the practice of land acknowledgement that we have been using throughout the summit. So every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contributed their energy to making the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here against their will, and some were drawn to leave their distant homes in hope of a better life. And some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. We acknowledge we are standing on ancestral lands, and we honor the thousands of enslaved Africans whose lives were physically and spiritually stolen. We pay respect to their elders past and present. Simple acknowledgement is a way to, a very simple step to attempt to right some of the wrongs of the past. Thank you again for joining us. I'm going to start with Sean James of Mural Masters to talk.
How's everybody doing?
About to start the session. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So thanks for the introduction, Ryan. My name is Sean James. I'm the owner and operator of Mural Masters, Inc. And today I'm co-presenting with my peer and a guy that I admire greatly, John Pounds. Hopefully we can overcome the technical difficulties and get him in on this thing sooner than later. Considering that I am going to be co-presenting, we're kind of moved through this relatively quickly. And I'm basically going to provide an overview of practical practices about doing murals. So if you wanted to get into the mural business, learn how to do a large-scale mural, these are some things that you should probably keep in mind, pay attention to, and take in consideration. And that's what this is more so than actually how to implement a mural. So with that being said, let me see if I can share my video here. Okay, so practical practice of mural making. I'm Sean James. Muralmasters@yahoo.com is my email address. Muralmastersinc.com is my website. So if you wanted to contact me directly, hire me, talk shop, got extra questions, feel free to reach out to me. My art background is pretty deep and diverse, but my mural history kind of starts in Baltimore City. I kind of did some things here, did a lot of community work, and eventually I landed a job with the Office of Promotion and the Arts, Baltimore Office of Promotion and the Arts, better known as BOPA. And during that time, I was a community arts coordinator and the director of the Baltimore Mural Program. With my time with the Baltimore Office of Promotion of the Arts, I produced approximately 150 or so different community art-based projects around Baltimore City.
You're on screen, and I see Sean is showing an image.
And so this is a video over in Park Heights.
So then I just have to wait until I'm
indicated to Tyler Mason. And then here's another one that I produced underneath the Office of Promotion of the Arts. This is by Nelson Rivas. It's down on Broadway in Fells Point. So I did a lot of work there. I cut my teeth with BOPA, and I learned a lot from the artists that I got to be able to associate with about how to create these murals and all the different obstacles that you might come across and things that you need. When my time there was done, I started Mural Masters, Inc. and became a for-profit business that does large-scale murals, hand-painted signs, art project management, and art program management. We hire artists on an as-needed basis, and we do work all around the country or wherever the opportunities happen to land me. This is a mural that I did with Charles Lawrence, a phenomenal wildlife painter, and it's down near Patterson Park. So getting started and funding. First of all, I think most of us here who are showing up here are artists. We already know creating a portfolio of relevant work is always necessary. Doesn't matter if you've done a little bit of work, a lot of work, you just assisted people on jobs, you have drawings, put the portfolio together, you're going to need it. Build professional relationships that foster collaboration and inclusion. So what that means is reach out to other organizations and make yourself known. See what they have going on. Find walls that are in neighborhoods that you want to paint on, and present yourself and your ideas to that neighborhood or to those neighborhood associations to kind of get yourself out there and start the ball rolling, because it's going to take some time when it comes to getting started and getting funding. Look for funding often. Development corporations, community programs, grants, private institutions, RFPs, requests for proposals, and RFQs, requests for qualifications. Oftentimes, there are grant cycles with different organizations that you have to get in, and it's a competitive cycle on top of that. So you want to make sure that you get in early and you get on top of things soon to find the money there. And then for those who don't know, an RFP is request for proposals. That generally means that you got to send in a proposal with your credentials, and it's a competitive process. And a RFQ is a request for qualifications, which is basically the same thing, except it's not requiring a proposal, and they generally narrow it down to a few artists, give them a stipend to come up with a actual mock-up, and then make their selection from there. Okay, timeline and budget. I think this is one of it's very, very important to really wrap your mind around. Timelines vary depending on scale and turnaround times, so plan accordingly. It's amazing that how many times a mural that takes 2 or 3 weeks to paint took 2 to 3 months just to get off the ground. So when you start the process in March, it might be June or July before you're actually putting a brush on this wall. And you need to figure out what the rest of your schedule is going to look like to kind of put everything together, and get to sort in weather as well. Budget. A detailed budget helps set parameters for funding and execution. Estimates should be close to actual cost. Some things to consider in your budget are your artist fee. Do you want to work for a lump sum? Is there already a set artist fee? Are you going to work by the hour? Are you going to work by the square footage? One thing sometimes works for the other, but not all the way around. I kind of employ all three depending on the project, but it's something that you need to consider. We could talk at length about how to approach a project and figure out what your artist fee is going to be. Design fee for conceptions, drawings, and mock-ups. I think a lot of artists and clients alike forget that it takes time for artists to sit down and think about what it is that they're going to make, how they're going to transfer that dialogue they had with a client or with a community and turn it into a visual statement. And then the time it takes for you to draw. How many drawings do you go through before you come up with the actual drawing that you want to present? And then when you present it, they send it back to you with changes that they want to have made. So you draw it again, and then you finally draw your final mock-up and in color, and all that time has to be taken consideration. Are you going to need assistance for labor? What are you going to pay them? Figure out your budget for your materials. What kind of equipment do you need? Scaffolding, lifts, generators, sprayers. Permits. Is the client handling the permits, or are you handling the permits? If you are, those things cost money, and there's time that it takes for you to get those things. So you got to keep those in consideration. The turnaround time for the permit office does not really care what kind of schedule that you're on. Wall prep. Sometimes I think it's forgotten that, the preparation for the mural is one of the most important parts of a mural. And though you're seemingly paid to come up with the ideas and just go out and paint, sometimes the wall needs to be prepped before you can go out and paint. And that's cost and labor and materials. Fuel, travel, and for equipment. You drive 30, 40 minutes, an hour one way to a job site. You got to drive back. So that's twice a day, 5 days a week for 2 or 3 weeks. That fuel adds up. That's coming out of your pocket. You need to take that in consideration. And also, if you're using any kind of lift, a lot of the bigger lifts are diesel. So you have to have a caveat side for that, where you want to have fuel for your equipment. And in that same kind of category, I put food, and people kind of overlook that. You go out there and you're working in the middle of nowhere, and you buy your lunch, $5 to $10 a day, every day, 10, 15, 20 days, adds up real quick. You need to put a per diem in there for yourself, or at least recognize that there's going to be a cost associated with that. Generally, what I say for most artists is brown bag it. It'll save you a lot of money in the end. Then you have insurance, whether it be general liability insurance, workers' comp insurance, health insurance. just insurance for yourself that, to make sure that things are running smoothly and you can continue to be a working artist. Part of that has to be factored in as well. And then there's always a contingency. And I think this is left off a lot of times. It's something that I definitely learned with working with Office of Promotion of the Arts, that there should be a contingency in your budget. Somewhere between 5 to 12, 15% of the overall budget should be set aside. So when you have 3 or 4 days of rain that puts you a week behind on your lift, you have the money there to be able to take care of that. Or you fall behind because of weather and you have to bring more labor onto the scene to help you get it done. You have a contingency to be able to pay them. So next, picking a wall. The selected wall dictates your budget due to size, access, and condition. Things to consider when selecting or pricing a wall: of course, the view to the public. Is this prime real estate? Will people be able to see it? Is it tucked into an alley? How would I be able to get to that wall? Depends on where it's located. Does that wall have loose paint? Does it have dilapidated flashing, untreated masonry, or broken masonry? These are things that have to be taken into consideration. Access to that wall. Will you need a lift or a ladder? If so, what type? Are there power lines in the way? Are you blocking a right of way? Or is any of your equipment or yourself in the way of traffic? Those are safety precautions that you have to take in consideration. And there are permits that you might have to pull, like a right-of-way or a right-of-way permit or an easement permit. So this is an example of a close-up of a detail of a wall where the paint and the plaster is flaking off, and you can't paint on top of that for obvious reasons. If you paint on top of this, when the old paint finally comes off the wall, it's going to take the new paint with it. So you have to go in there, and it's a shoulder and elbow busting thing to do, but you have to go in there and remove all that paint. Your labor and the materials needed to do that need to be taken into consideration. These are reinforcement bolts in the side of a building, and they're rusting away. So not only do you have to clean this part of the wall so that you can lay down a good foundation, but you also got to clean those pieces up. You might need a wire wheel. Well, how are you going to get that out there? You need metal etching primer, because a different type of primer that you're going to use on your wall, because those things are made out of metal to keep them from rusting in the future, because it's going to ruin your mural in the long run if you don't take care of them. This particular wall, as you can see, has a plot in front of it, a green space. So if I wanted to use scaffolding here, it would be very, very difficult and probably expensive for them to come and build scaffolding around there. And there's no way that you're going to get a scissor lift in there. So you're going to need to use a boom lift. Do you know how to use a boom lift? Boom lifts, I can tell you right now, generally are more expensive to rent than a scissor lift, but that's probably what it would take for you to get access to this wall. So those are some of the things that you definitely need to take in consideration when you're looking at your wall that you wanted to paint, or a wall that's selected for you. Prepping your selected wall for painting. So let's say you finally got to the wall, you figured it out. This is where you're going to be. I kind of have an idea what's gonna go on the wall, and we're ready to move forward with the mural. You've already had your idea approved, and you're getting your things lined up, and you need to get your wall ready to go. Prepping the wall is 60% of longevity, as far as I'm concerned. You've got to have a firm foundation to start on, or it will not last. Does your wall need to be pressure washed or generally cleaned? So sometimes the walls, you can come out there with a big broom and just knock the dirt off of it and get right to work. Start priming or start painting. But if it needs to be pressure washed, do you have a pressure washer? Do you have access to water? How are you going to get that done to get this wall clean? You can't paint on a wall, or you can, but it won't last you very long if you paint on a wall that's filthy from pollution, dirt, vines growing up, the weather, so forth. Scraping of the loose paint, you got to get that started. Minor masonry repair. So sometimes you'll find that there's holes that you can get a caulk gun and you can fill those holes up, or put some Quikrete in them to fix it up, or a brick that's going to be coming loose down the road where you can get some mortar compound and kind of put it in there and kind of fix it. I don't do major mason repair because I'm not a mason, and I make sure that if there's any kind of major construction issues that that need to be taken care of, that the client kind of takes care of those things. But I'll do minor mason repair, you know, to keep things moving forward. And then once you get all that that done and the paint's been scraped, but you can kind of see where paint's going to come off in the future, you might need to put a bridge primer down. And that kind of keeps the paint that hasn't quite started to flake off yet. It kind of keeps that glued down and helps you provide a surface for priming. And then you have your priming. Priming the wall is just like if you had a raw canvas. If you're painting on raw canvas, you want to prime your canvas first. You want to prime your wall. I recommend like a Kills 2 exterior latex primer. But if it's a bare brick or bare center block wall, you might want to move up to a grip and seal, which really gets into the pores of the brick or the masonry. And remember that if it hasn't been painted before, it's going to really absorb that paint, and you're going to need multiple coats. So you need to take that in consideration with how much material that you have and how much labor that it's going to take you to get that wall primed. So you got your wall primed, you got it picked out. Now you got your wall primed and ready to go, and you're ready for mural execution. Some things that you need to take in consideration is the equipment that you're going to use. Your mock-up. Do you have your mock-up ready to go to scale and in color? Are you going to draw this on the wall freehand? Some people can do that. Sometimes it depends on what your design is going to be. It's fairly easy to do. Or you could use the grid system. The grid system is a tried and true method. Once you have some practice with it, I think it works kind of the best. But most people, including myself, like to move to the projection method. I think if you have the ability to project, it makes things a lot easier, and it takes a lot of time off your labor. And then once again, using a quality paint. So here is a mural that's in Greenmount, and we use scaffolding for this. This is a mural produced with the Office of Promotion in the Arts. And we use scaffolding for this because that was what was available at the time and what people used when we were making murals back then. But as you can see, there's pros and cons to using the scaffolding. You know, the pros, of course, you can have access to the entire wall. You can have access to the entire wall in multiple parts and have different people working on different parts simultaneously. The cons, of course, is that the mural is obstructed with this apparatus in your way. And you will have to either use the freehand method or you have to use a grid system method to get your mural down on that wall, at least the drawing portion of it. So you got to go back and forth. This is use of a articulating boom lift. So pros and cons, once again. Pros, you have access to the entire wall. The wall's not obstructed from view. You can use the projection method with a boom lift. The cons is that it takes a little bit of time, patience, and experience to operate one safely. You're up high up in the air in a little bucket. You can't access the entire wall simultaneously with multiple people. Even on a scissor lift that just goes straight up and down, you are kind of constrained to the width of that scissor lift in that area that you are. So you're constantly moving equipment around to get access to the wall. So I don't know how many of us are professional artists and been here doing this for a while. So I kind of threw this in here for people who may not be familiar with the grid system. And so what this is imagine if you have a wall that is 60 feet tall by 40 feet wide. And I'm using these numbers because they're just easier to do. I went to art school, not math school. So let's say 60 feet tall, 40 feet wide. My drawing over here or my reference over here is of the horse's head, and I blocked it off in 6 by 4 blocks. And knowing that if my wall is 60 feet tall by 40 feet wide, each block is a 10 by 10 foot square. I would then go to my wall, use a chalk line or other different means, and put my lines on the wall using these measurements, and then I'd put the same lines on my drawing, and then I could easily look at my drawing and look at the grid system that's on the wall and transfer my drawing to the wall. It takes a little bit of time and effort to get it down, but it's one of the tried and true methods of transferring an image from one thing to the next. This is an example of the projection method. My friend Michelle Santos and I were painting this mural in the Bel Edison neighborhood, and we came up with our concept. We drew it all out. It got approved. Then we digitized the concept, put it into the computer, and projected it onto the wall. I like the projection method because it cuts down on time. Now, before I go further, I would like to say that when you do the projection method, you're already finished with the priming portion of the wall. You have your wall primed out and ready to go, and then you start drawing on it. So I like the projection method because it cuts down on time with the grid system. I don't have to put the grid in. I don't have to keep going back and erasing back and forth where I made my mistakes, even though that does happen no matter what you do. But what I also like about it is that you get to see the placement of where things are going to go. Is there a window in a way that you didn't really account for when you're drawing it on paper? Or is there a buttress that lands right in the middle of someone's face? Maybe it looks better, bigger, and then smaller, and you can adjust all that on the fly and see exactly how it's going to kind of lay out on the wall. So this is the mural once after we finished it. So you can see when we go back, that was our drawing, kind of done in colored pencils. We kind of outlined it in a very faint paint. Oops, my bad. And then we just went in and filled it in as you would normally do with any other mural. So then, importantly are your materials. You need an assortment of brushes, large brushes, 1 inch brushes, and larger is what I tell everybody to get. Get rollers of varying sizes and the covers that match with them, and just kind of stockpile them because you're going to go through them left and right. Paint pans, extension poles, in your paints, of course. Nowadays, there are a lot of graffiti artists and people who are moving to the spray paint, which is great. I mean, they make some remarkable, awesome stuff. I mean, they get some fades and some things in there that is just very difficult to do with a brush. So if you're going to go with this acrylic spray, I highly recommend it. But just don't go down to your local Ace Hardware or your Home Depot and buy your Rust-Oleum paint. Nowadays, they make quality acrylic spray you can get from your art supply store or from quality online graffiti spots that are long lasting and sometimes even archival. They're expensive, but they're available, and I highly recommend it. Since I do most of my stuff outdoors, I stick with exterior acrylic latex. It can be used indoors. The benefits of an interior latex, if you're working indoors, is that it's washable. Most of them are washable. Exterior latex really doesn't lend itself too much for that, but exterior acrylic latex usually have properties that help protect it from UV and pollution a lot better than interior acrylic latex. Most artists have moved away from the oil-based paints for obvious reasons, the thinners, environmental, and personal safety. Acrylic latex is the way to go. It's come a long way. Golden is a big name brand in the artists pigments, artist paints, and acrylic latex paints. I am a huge Nova Color fan. Nova Color is a paint that's definitely utilized around the country. LA and Philadelphia, they both utilize Nova Color paint. Downside is it can be a little bit expensive. Plus, you pay shipping, and it's paint's heavy, so you have to pay to get it over from California. But it's worth it. They use actual artist colors instead of just off the wall colors. You go to Home Depot and you'll get Cold Frost blue or something like that, and you're trying to figure out how to match that later on. Or you can go to Nova Color and you can get Prussian blue, or alizarin crimson. You can get artist colors there, and you can get them by the gallon size. So I really, really like Nova Color. I have other artist friends out there who definitely stand behind the Kime system. I think Kime is a little difficult to use and limiting, but for archival purposes, is probably one of the longer lasting of all the examples today. Water. I put this on here because I find that so many muralists get started. They got their paints, they got their job down, they got their brushes, they're ready to go, and then realize that there is no water. Bring your water with you. I always keep a 5-gallon bucket of water because you never know where you're going to be able to get it from. And sometimes I bring an extra bucket so that I have basically a dirty bucket where I clean my brushes out, or put dirty brushes and things of that nature, and always have a clean bucket of water. In most cases, you're going to need to bring your own water. Rags, drop cloths, separate containers. Rags obviously to clean up, drop cloths to cover your messes and your spills. I know you're working outside. If it's on the grass, it's not too bad, but you need to really protect the environment. And I think you come off as a lot more professional when you leave your job site as you found it. Separate containers to store paint, clean brushes, etc. Levels, rulers, chalk lines, all these things tools that you'll find that will become necessary, even if it's a little one-time use here and there. Projectors, computers, generators. Where are you going to get these things? You can rent them from like ABC or Safeway, Safe Light Rental. I forget the name of the place, but you can rent these things if you need to. But if you can purchase them and have a place to house them, I would recommend doing so. And you're going to need these things if you want to do the projection method. You're going out at night after hours, so you're going to need your computer to digitize your image and put it into the projector. You need your projector, obviously, to project. So where are you going to get your power source from? A small generator is always good to have. So you can run your computer, you can run your projector, you can run your paint sprayers, you can run your power washers. It's just a good thing to have because you never know if you're going to have access to electricity. Scrub brushes and isopropyl alcohol. And I say this because no matter how long you do this, you're always going to find yourself with paint on something that's not supposed to have paint on it. So the scrub brushes kind of come in handy. Cleaning your brushes, cleaning stuff off. I've knocked over paint on the sidewalk and had to douse it with water and get on my hands and knees with a scrub brush to make sure that it didn't stay there. And isopropyl alcohol is really good with getting relatively new paint off of things like banisters and floors and molding and things of that nature. Another thing with materials, ladders, lifts, and scaffolding. We all know about ladders, but how are you going to get them back and forth? I have a knockoff version of the little giant ladders, so it can be multiple sizes. It can be an 8-foot, 10-foot A-frame ladder. You can open it all the way up and expand it to a straight lean-to ladder at 18 feet. And when it's all folded up, it fits up into the back of my pickup truck. And I have 2 of them. Because you can make platforms with them, and sometimes I have people who assist me. Lifts, what kind of lift do you have? Where are you going to store it at night? Can you make sure that it's secure? Same thing with scaffolding. If you do get scaffolding, which is kind of hard in Baltimore City nowadays because most of the scaffolding companies want to do large-scale events and not smaller things like murals, so it's become exponentially expensive. There's another reason why people have moved to lifts. But if you do get scaffolding, make sure that you use wood planks. Unfortunately, I've had the problem of having a scaffold that had aluminum planks, and it was left in a few days without the artist being there. And when they came back, the aluminum was missing, and yeah, it was stolen and taken to a recycling plant. So use wood planks most of the time, and that most of the time your scaffolding is going to be pretty secure. But pay attention when you're using scaffolding. Are they going over windows? Do they lead access to other places? You want to make sure that your site is secure, but you don't want to be aiding and abetting people to use your scaffolding to do other nefarious things. Top coats. I try my best to stay away from top coats when it comes to murals. In the past, artists had to use varnish, and then varnish was a hit or miss thing. It yellowed, it cracked, it hazed. But it did protect it somewhat from pollution. Nowadays that you have transparent UV coatings that you can put on, and you have anti-graffiti coatings that you can put on. I would say do your research on anti-graffiti coating. I do like one that Sherwin-Williams produced. It's a non-sacrificial anti-graffiti coating, silicone-based. And what that means is that you put it onto your wall or your mural. And if someone comes by and they say they spray paint the mural, you can clean that spray paint off with soap and water, and the anti-graffiti coating is still there. It's non-sacrificial. The downside of it is that you need mineral spirits to thin it out. If you don't apply it properly, it will haze and get milky on you. These are things that I will use, and if absolutely necessary. High traffic area, anti-graffiti, the client definitely depends on it. But by and large, outside of bright yellows, most of the exterior latex acrylic paint nowadays kind of protect itself from UV and are pretty easy to clean. And I think a lot of public artists nowadays realize that there's kind of an unspoken rule between mural artists and graffiti artists that, you know, we are kind of cut from the same cloth. And I'd say 99.9% of the time, you can take a highly tagged area, graffiti area, put a decent mural on it, and the graffiti goes away. So I usually put anti-graffiti on it as a last-ditch effort. If it's in a rough neighborhood, if there's large patches of color that just lends itself to being tagged, things like that.
Hey, Sean, I just want to give you a time check. It's we're at 20 minutes and
Okay, well, this is my last part, and I added this specifically because you asked me to. So,
great.
Someone told me to talk a little bit about mural restoration, and I've done mural restoration around. And so really quick, if you're into the mural restoration portion of it, one of the most important things is documentation. Get as much documentation of the mural as you can before you start. Every angle, close-up detail as you can. Get as much documentation of what it used to look like, what it looked like in its original colors, and get that information out there, because when you start prepping this wall like you have to for other murals, if let's say you have to scrape away loose paint, well, when you scrape away that loose paint, you're going to be scraping away information about what the mural originally looked like. So document it as much as you possibly can. Research the images, the materials used. Was that a latex paint? I recently restored a mural that was almost over 50 years old. So I know it wasn't latex. It was an oil-based paint. So I had to figure out what I was going to do to get that substrate ready for the acrylic-based paint that I was going to be using. Can you contact the original artist? They'll give you a whole host of insight to what they originally did. Maybe they can give you original mock-ups, what have you. You have to make a decision. Do you want to restore or do you want to redo this mural? Some things are possible to restore. Maybe the colors need to be brightened up. There's a spot missing here or there. Maybe it's just such an icon like the Sistine Chapel that you have to restore that you're not going to redo it. But sometimes it's just has no choice but to be redone. It's just in too bad a shape to be restored. Preparation, like I was saying before, how are you going to prep and get ready for this? What tools do you need? And what are the costs that are associated with that extra labor, the finite skills of restoration, and any other particular specialty paints or items that you might need? This is an example of a mural that I restored in Cherry Hill. It's a mural by a pretty well-known artist, Tom Miller. And you can see that the years had really taken its toll on this wall. It's faded a lot, graffiti, flaking paint, what have you. So real quick, what we did here is that we went in, documented the whole thing. Then I pressure washed this wall. Then I got rid of most of any other flaking paint that came off of this wall. I was lucky enough to have one of the original mock-ups that the artist used to paint this wall. And then I put a bridge primer down to secure what was there. And I went back in, filled in, and repainted the mural. And one of the things I want to point out to you is, like, when you're looking at your wall, there are a lot of high voltage wires here. So I had to work with the client. I had to work with the business owners that were in this building. And I had to work with BG&E because we had to have powered shutdowns, because for my own personal safety and for OSHA regulations, I couldn't have myself and a lift up near any of these high voltage wires. So we had to shut down energy to the wall when I painted those sections. This is what the mural looked like when it was completed. Challenges. Scheduling. Make sure that you plan ahead and plan according. Time management and planning is very, very important. Like I said, 2 to 3 weeks to paint a mural, 2 to 3 months to get it off the ground. The weather, keep track of it. Learn how to read clouds and realize that, you know, sometimes it's going to be a sprinkle, sometimes it's going to be a downpour. Do your due diligence and be persistent. Be organized. If you look in the corner here, you see a photograph of paints. What I've done is I was able to get some 2-liter Coke bottle carriers from a convenience store that they were throwing away. And that's what I keep all my quart size paints in, and I can keep track of everything. Be organized with your contracts and everything. And of course, practice. The more you love to do something, the more you'll do it. And that counts as practice. And the more practice you do, the better you'll get at everything. So I'm Sean James. I'm with Mural Masters Inc. MuralMastersInc.com is my website. MuralMasters@yahoo.com is how you can reach me via email. Mural Masters Inc. with underscores is my Instagram handle, and you can find me on Facebook if you want to reach out to me. You have further questions, want to hire me, or just talk shop. I'm here and available. Thank you very much for showing up, and I'm going to turn this back over to Ryan and my esteemed peer, John Pounds. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Sean. That was so great, and you were such a resource for Baltimore, so thanks for giving us your time. I'd like to introduce John Pounds, who we're very pleased to have with us as well today. John's the former executive director of the Chicago Mural Group and joins us from there. With the beauty of being on a virtual summit, we can bring in people from out of town. I'm going to try to share the slides here. Everybody see this? Is that coming up for everyone? Do I need to? Is that working well for you too? Oh, you know what? I have John on. There we go. Hey, John, can you hear me? And can you give me a test?
Yep, I can hear you. Yep.
Great, I can hear you. We are good to go. So you'll have to let me know when
do you see the blue screen?
Yes.
Have I shared yet? Okay. First of all, how much time do you want me to take?
We are going to go till 4:20 at this point.
So 20 minutes or so. Cool. First of all, I want to say,
Ryan,
you are a real gift. What's that?
I will advance your slides.
Okay. Oh, you can do that. First of all, I just want to say, Ryan, you are a real gift to the community of Baltimore and where you work. You have packed a ton of information in there, stuff that I first started learning back when I had dark hair and a light sense of humor. And it's amazing how much stuff you were able to put into 20 or 25 minutes. Credit to you for paying a lot of attention. It's a set of things that I know, and I know fairly well. The fact that you know them so thoroughly well speaks well of how much you have immersed yourself in this and how good you are at it. You are a real benefit to the city. Chicago has a different history. We have a history of mural making. Now, do you advance or do I advance?
I advance.
Can you see that advance? Okay, so how do I tell you to advance?
Just tell me to advance. So I have Chicago's mural history briefly.
Okay, but what I'm doing there doesn't change anything for you.
We can't see yours, no.
So here's the quick form, advance.
Yep.
The quickest form is to say that the mural movement began in Chicago in 1967 when the Wall of Respect was painted. What's not often known about it is that these were muralists who were behaving like jazz artists. And believe me, 1967 was not a time when visual artists were learning to collaborate with each other or with the community. The models for making visual art before that, public and private, were almost entirely an artist in charge, almost always male, almost always white, who was in charge of putting the work into a finished form. And there was virtually no collaboration. But the Wall of Respect was the very first ever community mural. It was this place when men and women collaborated to produce this piece that quickly transformed public art across the country. Advance, please. Can you hear me?
Yep, issues addressed.
Advance. Okay. So what's I think really important about the community mural movement, and in Chicago it has moved out of murals, though it continues to do murals. It does a lot of work with spray paint, a lot of work with combining murals and spray paint, and then also with other kinds of materials, mosaics and glass, concrete, cement, all sorts of materials that go into it. But it is primarily an expression of pride in the community spirit. That's what the Wall of Respect was. It was showing respect for the community, and that's what's happened then subsequently. A new one, please.
Mm-hmm.
lag there.
We are at
to say earlier.
Community spirit, community complexity.
Oh, I'm not seeing that. Okay. I think I need to put this away. There.
Is that better?
So, yeah, that works for me. Sorry about this. The thing of it is that the issues that were addressed are still relevant today. Wow. I love technology. The issues that were addressed are still relevant today. And a lot of it had to do with the thing we're struggling with right now, which is dialogue, because muralists and artists were so often monological and they just talked to their assistants and had things done the way they wanted it done or to the person who hired them. But the mural movement really transformed that, and it shows up in a lot of ways because muralists and other public artists are much more likely to be involved in dialogue with each other and with the community at large. And I'll address that again, a new one. It's not something, click, yes. It's not something that artists are necessarily attuned to, but it is something of real value because it does mean that in dialogue, we're able to unite communities or unite components of communities by having real deep conversations that had better be truthful, but that they can result in new understandings that everybody shares. And so the importance of an artist simply having an idea and putting it up becomes instead the artist as the leader of a conversation, of a dialogue that results in something much more transformative and astonishing. Click. So there are some things to think about for approaching restorations. Click. We have three rules, three questions that we look at. When we think of a restoration, it's like there are reasons to do them, but is it necessary or is it important to do it? One is the mural the work of a significant influential artist? That is, was the mural that was done by an artist who really profoundly affected the world through their work? A second one. Did the mural inspire other artists to do excellent work? That is, because there's a lot of collaboration, but sometimes a mural really was one that caused other people to think of doing mural work on their own. And the third, is the mural still relevant today? Relevancy really is not something that stays permanent. Relevancy is something that changes with politics, with gentrification sometimes, with the economy, with culture, with style. And the question is whether the mural is still relevant, because should a mural be restored if it's not relevant anymore, if it's simply a historical artifact? It's possible that it should, but it sort of begins to limit what the possibilities can be. New one. Question of who owns the wall is sort of a literal question. The wall may be owned by the building owner, or it sometimes is owned by an underpass. So it's the railroad company or sometimes the city that has some responsibility for it. But knowing who owns the wall legally is important. More important, though, does the community feel ownership of the image on the wall? That is the image that's there something that the larger community actually believes that it owns responsibility for, both the creation of it and the history of it and the presence of it? Or is it something that the community really has no particular ownership over? The odd thing about a mural is that it can't be purchased by somebody else other than the person who put it up. It can't be moved to another site. It can't accumulate more value because it's at a different site. What a mural does is much different than what most art does in terms of creating value, because it's not about what the value is for the money, though I will say, Ryan, you did a great job of covering the money and the issues. That was...
Sean.
Yes, I'm sorry, Sean. Excuse me. Sean, you did a great job of covering that. It was really superb. But does the community feel ownership of the image? And then another one. And what does ownership of the wall have to do with the ownership of the mural? Sometimes the ownership of the wall is no longer interested in the mural, or they've quite moved on, they have different aesthetics, and yet sometimes the community still really feels ownership of the mural and wants to see it sustained. So I'm going to give you just one example of some things that we've done on that. You do want to look at the physical properties of the mural. I really loved what Sean had to say. The early murals in Chicago where we first started were done with oil-based paint, and it's because oil-based paint was considered to be the best paint, but in fact they sort of suffocated walls. It meant that moisture could not move through them, and so artists have moved to acrylic paint, and Sean, you covered that beautifully. But what's above and behind a wall? Most often it's water. It's either humidity that's coming through the building, or it's through the roof, which may have a leak in it, or it's letting water in. In some cases with an underpass, it's water that's falling on dirt and soil above that's coming down, and it does not simply go down, down, down. It comes sideways and out through a wall. What's in front of the wall that damages a mural is sun and the issues of light fastness. You do have to look at the light fastness, and not all colors are equally light fast, not all pigments are equally light fast. You do want to consider that. There are things that you can do that will help with improving the light fastness, but if you cannot keep the humidity in control, that is not to say that you keep it from passing through. The very good benefit of an acrylic paint, if it's not too loaded, is that humidity will pass through it and will stay on the wall. The paint will stay on the wall. Art conservators, if they're going to do a conservation, recommend a gentle cleaning with detergent. It could be a very light power washing detergent, followed by, if needed, for oxidized paint where you have seen certain loss of pigment saturation, the use of diacetone alcohol as a way of re-brightening and reanimating a film. But when you have delaminating paint where it's bubbling in some way because humidity most often is coming through, then it can be reattached a bit with that isopropyl alcohol and PVA glue. It can be gently pressed back down and put back into place. That won't restore the piece like it was a museum piece, but will allow you to reattach material so you don't have to redo everything, and you have a good more guidance as you would work on the restoration because more of the pigment is there. Other technical, what is the condition of the wall? We have had walls that we painted on where we knew they were going to have, the paint was going to be lost, so that we did a very simple section under the paint part where the water was flooding down the wall, and indeed that part of it was covered. But what we've done in other moments now is to create little troughs at the top that move the water that comes off the top of the wall, and we let it drip about 2 inches in front of the wall down to the ground, and that has been really superb at protecting walls. But you do need to know what are the conditions, what are the materials that were used, and as Sean was saying, how good is the visual and written documentation? Who owns the wall? Who owns the image? Literally, ownership is not something that can, well, it can be a legal issue, but it has something to do as well with permission and with the spirit of a piece. And to some extent, if you're going to try to restore something, who was going to fund such a thing? Also have to consider ethical issues, which I think are really important. If an artist is no longer alive, do we have any right to restore their work anymore? Or is the artist the only person who can approve of a plan or effort to restore? What if the original artist wants to participate? Do they have to be incorporated? And how do the original and restoration artists share the ownership of the restored piece? This really does, again, come down to dialogue. It really comes down to how do people, artists, talk to each other about the history and about the future, about meaning, and about the creative process that we all share. Again, literally, how skilled is the restoration artist? If you don't, it's not that you can't, you can be a great artist, but if you can't match the style of the original artist, you're not going to be able to do a very good restoration. You can do other things, but unless your skills is that you can give up your own ego a little bit and to match your id and your knowledge and your hand to the look of the original artist, you'll be doing something other than a restoration, which might be okay, but you need to know that the restoration artist is skilled enough to hide their own process in making a restoration, if the restoration is to be just simply make it look the same. I'll show you this one. It was done in 1973 with oil-based paint on an underpass. It was restored by Bernard Williams in 2010, so it's now 10 years later. I'll show you a couple of quick images. The Spirit of Hyde Park really looks at the neighborhood of Hyde Park, which was very close to where the Wall of Respect was painted. And the neighborhood is the University of Chicago. It has a lot of complex history. It's a very progressive politics. But as you see on the left here, which was the mural of a professional person walking through a crowd, and on the right you see the restoration. And the original and the restoration were done differently because in part we did not have full documentation of all of the murals, so we didn't know how to do it. The original mural was done with oil-based paint, so much of it was lost, as you'll see in another image. And yet the idea was that the artist who restored it, Bernard Williams, is very skilled, and was very able to match some components. And I can't even show you all of them, but I'll show you a couple. On the left here, you'll see a group of people who were simply in front of a colonnade. And it's Hyde Park, 1975. What do you know? On the very left, you have an interracial couple with their kids. And then on the right, you see a black couple being kind to a small child. So it was showing off the grace and the certainty of the community that interracial relationships were positive and could be portrayed. On the right here, you see what the mural looked when we started to restore it. Because it was oil-based paint, it had lost that much. Also, look at the very right there, you'll see some young people in red sport coats. That's from a choir scene. Now a new one. Excuse my cough. And what you'll see is they actually took out the colonnade in the background. It was considered to be sort of uninteresting, but the figures are very much the same. You see the interracial couple with the kids. What's not immediately apparent in this painting, though, is that the couple in the very center is now a same-sex couple. So where it had been a male couple caring for a child, now it was a same-sex couple caring for a child. Subtle changes and very distinct changes were made. The choir in red coats ended up being in just black and white. But there were other components to it that were really quite different. That's okay, that's fine. Next one. So what I'll do is just do very briefly is to say, if you want to see more about Chicago Public Art Group's history of making work and best practices, look at the CPAG net/guide. That site has all sorts of content in it about working with different people in different settings and all of the troublesome and creative processes that are there. I think that's all I need to say today.
Hey, thanks, John. Thanks, Ryan.
Okay. Thank you, guys. So I'm going to see if at this point we'll open up to any questions. We'll take another, I'd say 10 minutes for questions if we have any. It looks like we've got a couple. So this might be for both. When you project an image onto a wall, how do you keep it from being skewed? And Sean, I see you started answering that below.
Yeah. Yeah, you're going to get some, the image is going to be skewed a little bit. first thing I recommend is that you select a projector that has the keystone option. And what that does, it allows you to kind of, you can't really see my hands, but kind of push and pull the image to kind of get it right. Sometimes you can skew the image to make it look right and scale in the software that you're using. Specifically, if you're using Photoshop or something like that, you can kind of push and pull it to get it going. But what I found out is that I say at least 60% of the time, no matter how perfect it is, how skewed I got it fixed, when I showed up the next day to look at it in the light, there was something wonky that you had to fix that just wasn't right. So you just got to correct it. But most of it's there, and you have a lot of other information on that wall to help you fix it.
Then there's another question here. Lynette Rogers noticed that when she was in Chicago, she noticed a lot of mosaic murals and asked if there was any guidance on that. Do you all have experience working in mosaics specifically?
We did virtually all of the history and nearly all the production of mosaics. And if she's looking at underpasses along Lakeshore Drive, for example, in particular, there's really astonishing mixed media pieces that use glass tiles, ceramic, handmade ceramic, all sorts of forms. And what we've paid particular attention to is a couple of things that are different than doing a mural. If you have a crack on an underpass wall, you don't want to patch it with mortar, with any sort of putty or anything, because that isn't going to stay. The crack that's there on the underpass wall is going to stay forever. So what you do is you can either allow it, your mosaic, to go up to either side of it, or if it goes over it, just make sure that you're really attaching the tile on one side more than the other so that the tile can float slightly based on the movement that the crack is an implicit part of. The crack is there because there's a movement in the wall. It means that humidity is coming through the wall. But what we've found is that by using high quality, high fire clay or glass and the concrete, that we've been able to do a very wide variety of different surfaces over, let's see, I think the first mosaic was done by women in the early 80s, no, maybe 1979. And it was really something that just has been very powerful.
That's interesting. I know sometimes artists, mosaic artists or paint artists may revert to using panels, either by putting like a backer board up to work on top of or work off site and then installing panels. But I think the point you bring up, that the site moves and has its own movement, is important to remember anywhere. That
we have one that I know of that was done on panels, and the panels came loose. It was sort of a test for us to find out if it was acceptable, but the train that passed overhead clearly was vibrating enough it's better just get the wall sandblasted clean so you're down to bare concrete, then use really good quality materials to attach directly to it, and pay attention to the cracks so that you work around them rather than assuming that you don't fix a crack by tiling over it. It's going to be there.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Let me see. It looks like there's some others. Any more recommendations on the anti-graffiti top coat? Sean, I know you talked about one specifically from Sherwin-Williams. Do we know any other options out there?
There are a few options out there. In the beginning, I was using more environmental friendly top coats, but I found that they didn't apply very well and they didn't last nearly as long. So I went with one with Sherwin-Williams. I don't remember what the actual numbers are for it, but if you go into any Sherwin-Williams, you ask for anti-graffiti silicone-based anti-graffiti coating, they'll know exactly what you're talking about. Like I said, I think it's a really good product. The downside is it takes some skill to apply it correctly to make sure that it doesn't haze up on you, doesn't get milky. It doesn't work very well in spray machines, so you have to kind of do a wet roll and then do a damp back roll behind it. It costs $100 a gallon the last time I checked, and it only has a 1-year shelf life. So therefore, a lot of Sherwin-Williams don't hold it. You have to ask for it, and then they'll have it shipped in or shipped into you. So that's the downsides to it. But so far, it's the best anti-graffiti coating stuff that I've been able to find and use. But I'm open to anybody else has anything else too.
I would reflect on that just briefly too. I really agree with you, and you're spot on. Chicago has the split history of spray artists and muralists working nearby. The interesting thing that we did starting in '93 was collaborating with spray artists. So we have almost 30 years now of spray artists working with muralists and muralists with spray artists in a variety of settings. And so we have built some connections between the two forms. There are still a few young men who are willing to tag anything. Mm-hmm. The other thing that we do, though, among the things we do, is to design very densely from about 18 inches off the ground to about 6 feet over the ground. Don't leave too many flat color areas there, because that's where it's a flat color area that graffitiists will often write on. And if there aren't that, then they'll be respectful and go find some other place to write.
Right. And I'd like to add too, there's a difference between a graffiti artist and a tagger. Necessarily, graffiti artists tag, but there's a lot of people who just want to tag anything and everything. And there's a difference between a graffiti artist, a tagger, and a vandal. A vandal doesn't care what it is. It'll be your car, your business, your window. Doesn't care. You're not going to be able to protect yourself from that person. You know. Tagger and the graffiti artist, generally speaking, have respect for other people's property, other people's artwork.
Yeah, we could have a long conversation about these kinds of collaborations and occasional frictions, but we are very much in the same park on this.
Right. We have one more question that I found, or at least when I saw. So I have not come across this, but Margaret Rifkin asks, "What does anyone have experience posting bond for a project to provide for a future removal?" I guess that's saying you're going to put money up front and then they'll give it back to you when the piece is removed. I have not heard of that in a professional commission setting, but maybe
I haven't either, and I would avoid it, to be honest with you, because it doesn't seem like they have a commitment to a long-term public art piece to be put in that place if it's going to be removed. And if you definitely think it's going to be moved, then I would recommend putting up a metal stainless lattice system and then hanging MDO board and painting it directly on MDO. And then that way, then you can unscrew it and move it that way. I wouldn't paint it directly on the wall. I've removed frescoes from walls that were going to be transferred to another place, and it's one of the biggest pain in the asses I've ever had to come across.
I mean, it is common that maybe not as much for murals, not that it couldn't apply, but that a public art commission would require the artist to advise on maintenance for the future and talk about what materials should be used to maintain a work, but not to have to put up your own financial bond. In my experience,
I think we should not let ourselves step into that area, because that doesn't have any good outcomes.
No, let them factor that in. Let their client take care of that.
So, Latoya Peoples is asking.
Hey, Latoya.
Hey, Latoya. Does anybody have experience with parachute cloth murals, like is often used in Philadelphia?
Yeah, I have. I don't know, John, I'm sure you have. I've had experience with it. I think there, with every material, there's a pro and a con to it. You got to get the right material. You can get Nova Gel, which you can get from Nova Color. I mean, there's other adhesive mediums that you can use, but Nova Color usually has all that stuff, because that's the product. I don't know what they use today, but that's the product that Philadelphia started off using, was from Nova Color. So you can call them up, and they got all the stuff that's there. And once again, it's make sure that the substrate is completely clean. You can apply the Nova Gel to the wall, then impregnate the material and put it onto the wall, and you apply it much like you would a wallpaper. What you need to do is try to get your material amounts correct and make sure that all your seams line up, and knowing that you might have to go back in and touch stuff up. The biggest pro that I found is that artists can work on a mural during off seasons like the wintertime, and you can also get non-artists to be able to participate in your product or in your project, whereas they're not going to be allowed to be on scaffolding or a lift or something like that. Now you can take it in-house and have anybody kind of work on it. So it definitely has a lot of pros in that manner.
Mm-hmm.
You nailed it.
And last one, before we wrap up, one person asked how to get into murals without much experience. And I want to just point out that before I turn it to you all, that's something that came up in a great session we had yesterday with Renee Paichaki. And she was focused on more of like when you've got the interview level of a commission, how to advance and how to do that interview. But she missed a great example. So if you want to go back and watch the recording of that, that might be helpful. And she really pointed to, like, I think if you're working in a studio as an artist, you might want to try some things out. So if you're a mosaic artist, maybe make some boards and then try placing them in the public realm so you can show what that looks like. Even if it's not a commission, you can kind of create your own portfolio. So maybe you guys have something to add.
Yeah, I would mostly add that the CPAG.net guide that I had flagged earlier, that particular site has really great practices of all sorts for how to do things. It's not at all just showing off the work. It really is about the technical components of how to use the materials best.
Yeah. And I would recommend, if you are working in your studio, if there is a wall in your studio that you can just white out and paint, just practice painting stuff on it and then white it out and paint it on top of that. And I go back to what I was saying before about building professional relationships with other communities, what have you, is when you get your name out there, other artists and projects get started, you'll know about them, and then you go and talk to a lot of artists. And I tell you, most muralists out there would love to have a helping hand if you have any kind of skill set. And you start working with them, and it's the old, pro bono, working for experience kind of thing.
That's how you find out.
And how you find out what the next job is going to be, and you kind of build your skill set from there.
Great. Thank you so much. We had a nice comment here to say, I use Mural Masters Clear Coat and have had terrific results. That must be for top coat. So thank you guys so much. And I know we could go on and on, but it has been an hour and 6 minutes. And I think you all have earned your afternoon time. So from here to wherever you are, thank you all, and be well, everybody.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, John.
It was a pleasure. Very nice to see you again, Sean.
Definitely.
Take good care. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, everybody. Take care.